In the dead of night, he slipped through the windows. He didn't knock, he didn't speak, and when you finally opened your eyes, it was already too late. He wasn't just a killer, he was a shadow, silent, random, and unstoppable. Richard Ramirez, the man California came to fear as the Night Stalker. Between 1984 and 1985, he raped, tortured, and murdered without pattern or mercy. His victims ranged from children to the elderly. He carved symbols of Satan. He watched people die and smiled. And the scariest part, he could have picked anyone. Even you. Before he was the Night Stalker, he was just Richard, a quiet boy with dark eyes and a silence that never seemed to lift. Born on February 29, 1960, in El Paso, Texas, Richard Ramirez grew up in a house where love was a ghost, and his father's anger filled every corner. The beatings came without warning, the shouting without end. At home, Richard learned to move quietly, to shrink into the background like a shadow. He found escape in the worst place possible, his older cousin, Miguel, a decorated Vietnam veteran on the outside, but twisted and haunted within. Miguel showed Richard things no child should see: photographs of war crimes, mutilated bodies, women bound and brutalized. He spoke of it all casually, like old hunting stories. Then one day, when Richard was just 13, Miguel shot his wife in front of him. Blood splattered the floor, and Richard just stood there. From that moment, something inside him broke, or maybe it awakened. He started drawing pentagrams, sleeping in cemeteries. He wandered through adolescence like a ghost in his own skin, unreachable, unknowable. By the time he left El Paso for California, the boy was gone, and something else had taken his place. 3 a.m. She woke up because the air felt wrong, just wrong, like something had shifted in the room while she slept. The curtains still swayed from the open window. She didn't remember leaving it open, and then she saw the boot print on the carpet. Her breath froze. A sound creaked at the foot of her bed. She couldn't scream. She couldn't move. She could only stare at the shadow standing in her room. His head tilted, his chest barely rising, as if he were listening to her fear. When the police arrived hours later, she was still alive, but only just. She couldn't speak, not clearly. Her body told the story for her. Bruises, shallow breathing, eyes wide with a fear she couldn't put into words. But what unsettled the detectives the most wasn't the violence. No broken windows, no pried doors, no fingerprints, nothing. Except for one chilling detail, a single boot print on the carpet. The same print had been found at a murder scene just a week earlier. This time, he didn't kill. But in leaving her alive, he left behind a clue. That was the moment detectives realized. This wasn't random. This was someone specific, someone brutal, someone who moved like smoke in the dark, and a name began to form on their lips, passed from one officer to another, whispered in every late-night briefing, the Night Stalker. And that's when they began to see the pattern, or rather, the terrifying lack of one. He attacked the elderly. He attacked children. He killed men in their sleep, assaulted women who never saw his face. In March 1985, he broke into the home of Vincent and Maxine Zazzara. He ended both of their lives, but with Maxine, he had gone even further, leaving behind signs so disturbing that seasoned officers stepped out for air. 2 weeks later, he entered a young couple's house in Whittier. The husband was gone by sunrise. The wife survived, but would never speak again. Then came the northern cases, Peter and Barbara Pan. The same methods, the same footprint, but now miles away from Los Angeles. His range was growing. He chose homes like rolling dice, silent, random, without warning. And every time the sun set, California held its breath. Through the gruesome cases, the murderer's style has been portrayed differently. He is brutal, sometimes shooting, sometimes using a hammer, sometimes using only his bare hands. The killer worships Satan, doing everything as if he were on a demonic mission. If there are 2 people in the house, he kills the man and tortures the woman. He doesn't like to stare, and he has disgusting teeth. What led the police to his trail began with the footprint of a size 11.5 shoe. The brand, Avia, a very rare sneaker. Only 6 pairs of that size were sold in all of Los Angeles. Then, a stroke of luck. A boy, just 13 years old, heard something outside his house. He woke his parents. They caught a glimpse of the intruder running away, and his car, not the full license plate, but the number, the details. The police found the car abandoned a few days later in Koreatown. The engine was cold, the seat was pushed far back, and dangling from the mirror, an old can of pine-scented air freshener, still swinging. But the important thing was the mirror itself. A fingerprint, faint, smudged. They ran it through the database, and then a name lit up on the screen like a flame in the dark. Richard Ramirez, a man with a criminal record, a vagrant, a thief, a name that meant little, until now. All the evidence pointed to him being the ghost in the window, the shadow by the bed, the night stalker, and he was real. August 31st, 1985. One headline would change everything. He saw it, his own face, on the front page, and then he ran. A monster among civilians, now hunted in daylight. The city that once feared him was now closing in. And just like that, the night stalker met the daylight. Months after his arrest, Richard Ramirez sat on trial, but he wasn't silent, and he wasn't sorry. Ramirez at the defense table, smirking. He lifts his hand slowly, his left palm, a crudely drawn pentagram in black ink. He locks eyes with the camera and whispers, "Hail Satan." A victim's mother gasps in the gallery. Her hands cover her mouth. A father grips his chair. The monster wasn't seeking mercy. He wanted attention, worship, fear. To Ramirez, this wasn't a trial. It was a performance. But the jury gave him the one thing he feared most: silence. Ramirez being led away in shackles, still smiling. Behind him, a blurred pentagram remains drawn on the courtroom table. Evil never apologizes. It smiles and whispers back. Inside San Quentin's death row, the night stalker should have vanished into silence. But somehow, his story only got stranger. A lonely prison cell. Ramirez sits cross-legged on the bed, sorting through a pile of letters. Among hundreds of fan letters was one written in flowing cursive from a woman named Doreen Leoy. She wrote to him for years, calling him kind and funny. And in 1996, she married him, behind prison glass, before guards and cameras. To her, Ramirez wasn't a monster, but a misunderstood soul. In 1996, she married him, inside the walls of San Quentin. While families mourned, she declared, "He's my soulmate. Even evil can be adored, if the lie is big enough, and the heart blind enough." June 7th, 2013. A line of text scrolled quietly across a local news screen. Richard Ramirez, the night stalker, dies at age 53. No gas chamber, no final words, no justice felt. He died in a hospital bed, not by execution, but by cancer. B-cell lymphoma slowly ate away at the body that had once moved like a ghost through California's nights. There was no ceremony, no candlelight vigil, just a sigh of frustration more than closure. Because for those who remembered the fear, the footsteps in the dark, the whispers of "Hail Satan," Ramirez's death wasn't an ending. It was an echo. In living rooms across the state, old photographs were taken out again. A little girl in pigtails, a smiling mother, a husband holding his newborn son. Gone. All gone. Because of him. The scars he left weren't just in crime scene photos or courtroom transcripts. They lived in the trembling hands of survivors, in the nightmares of children who had once hidden under beds, in every parent who double-locked their windows after 1985 and never stopped. Richard Ramirez was buried with a number. No one claimed his body. No one mourned. But California still remembers, and the name Night Stalker still drips like poison from its history, a wound that time cannot close. No more faces, no more voices, just silence, and the creeping realization. Evil doesn't always come from the shadows. Sometimes it wears a jacket, smiles at your door, and walks right in at the moment you feel safest. That was Richard Ramirez, not a monster in a nightmare, a man in this world with a key to your house.